Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Ian Tuttle of National Review in for Jim Garrity today. Jim is off on the National Review cruise all week, and Ian is graciously filling in for us. And Ian, it's great to have you back.
I'm glad to be here.
Plenty of good, bad, and crazy news to start off the week. And if it's anything like last week, there's going to be plenty of bad and crazy, and we'll get to that in just a moment. The good news is related to one candidate in the presidential field, although several have been saying some fairly good things lately. But we're going to be focusing on Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker in a couple of different ways here to start out the podcast. First of all, Scott Walker today signing the 20-week abortion ban bill in Wisconsin. It's been a fairly popular piece of legislation around the country. It also finally passed the U.S. House of Representatives a little bit earlier this year, and this is basically the pain-capable pro-life bill, saying most science shows that at the very latest, at 20 weeks, the unborn feel pain, and at that point, unless there's an emergency, a rape, or something like that, there should definitely be protections for the unborn. The other issue that Scott Walker's getting attention for, and Ian wrote about in also replacing Jim on the Morning Jolt today, is Scott Walker's explanation of his opposition to the president's unilateral amnesty, as a lot of folks call it, from last year. He was confronted by an illegal immigrant in Iowa named Jose Flores, as well as the daughter and son of Mr. Flores. Scott Walker trying to explain why he opposed the president's action. And you'll also hear what appears to be a member of the media trying to chime in on this conversation later in the exchange.
The president last year, after saying 22 times before last year that he couldn't make the law up himself, he said he wasn't the emperor, he said he was the president of the United States, and he said he couldn't change the law. Decided to change the law, even though the courts have now said that you can't do that. So my point is you got to follow the law, follow the process. I completely sympathize with the situation you're all in, and others are in.
So that's why you want to separate their family?
Actually, I'm talking to them, but I appreciate the chance to actually talk to them and not to others in the media.
Obviously, a very objective media corps trailing around Scott Walker there, saying, as he explains, that no one's above the law. So that's why you want to separate their family. So points to Walker for standing his ground when it had to be a fairly uncomfortable situation. Points to him for upholding the rule of law, and obviously for sticking up for the unborn as well.
These are two really good things for Walker. And let's start just briefly with abortion. This is as you said, a very popular piece of legislation. I think there's something approximating this in the majority of states now. And of course, it comes in the wake of the revelations about Planned Parenthood allegedly trafficking in human or fetal body parts. So the media cycle is primed for this. It's particularly good on the question of polling, which is much more complicated than the left wants you to believe. The abortion polling is fairly nuanced in the sense of basically everything that's termed today a second trimester or third trimester abortion is vigorously opposed by the vast majority of Americans. And the only area in which there's leeway is on first trimester abortion, so approximately these 20-week cutoffs and earlier. So this is right in line with where the vast majority of the country stands, despite the fact that you have a Wendy Davis or that type of individual who will occasionally make a fuss about it and gain some national media. The polling and the American public are right on board with Walker and the vast majority of other governors who've pursued this, as well as the House of Representatives. So A+ to him for pushing this through in Wisconsin. To the immigration, as I noted this morning in the Jolt, Walker has been called out by National Review, among others, for doing an about-face on amnesty, and we can have that debate about whether he's just talking the talk, or whether, if push comes to shove, he'll also walk the walk. That's fine. We can talk about that. We should. But since declaring that he had changed his mind on the issue, he's been not only remarkably consistent, but he's also gone further than the other Republican candidates in actually promoting a vigorous debate about what America's immigration priorities need to be. He deserves enormous credit for this exchange, because this is exactly the type of gotcha exchange that Republican candidates need to anticipate and be prepared for, not only during the primary season, but of course, whoever the nominee is will certainly get this sort of thing in the general. And as you see, the media is not going to help. Walker stuck to his guns and promoted the two things which I think are crucial here. One is that this is a nation of laws, not of men, as the framers put it, and that needs to work across the board. And this administration has done enormous damage in basically convincing a huge number of people that the law is written at the whims of the president. And that's simply not the case, nor is it tenable for a constitutional republic. And secondly, Walker has said that our immigration priorities, and he says this in the exchange elsewhere, need to be prioritized to not hurt American workers. That's a very important point, which comes which comes from Jeff Sessions and some of the other immigration hawks on the Hill. And we can have a debate about the economics behind this, about whether illegal immigration at the levels and legal immigration at the levels that we've been promoting it for the past several years have depressed wages across the board. There's fairly strong evidence that that's true, et cetera. But what Walker is doing is he's promoting an actual debate about this, that not only the Beltway broadly, but the Republican Party doesn't want to have. And I think he's going to score a lot of points with Republican primary voters who are very concerned about the immigration issue and look at the other candidates and see that none of them are willing to talk about this frankly. I think he's going to do very well among those people. Props to him for promoting this debate and this position.
All right, on to the bad martini now. And today is July 20th. July 20th should be a revered day in American history because that was the day of the moon landing in 1969. But today, two of the president's most controversial foreign policy moves are taking official steps. Officially today, we have restored full diplomatic relations with Cuba. We got Alan Gross in return for the restoration of full diplomatic ties. We have apparently not debriefed Mr. Gross. That was a crazy martini a couple of weeks ago, and the Daily Beast reported that in months and months since his release, nobody from the government's actually bothered to get his story about what happened while he was in captivity. Meanwhile, we haven't gotten any of the people from our most wanted list that's gone back, and it appears that the Cuban regime is not really changing much of what it's doing. And also today, the UN Security Council has officially endorsed the Iran nuclear deal, putting the onus on Congress to do something, if it can, about U.S. sanctions. But ultimately, the Iran deal, for the most part, is going forward here. So, Ian, these two issues where a lot of conservatives obviously believe the Obama administration proved it was amateur hour and got manhandled by both the Iranians and the Cubans coming to a head on the same day.
Yeah, it's a nice bit of symmetry, a nice bit of convergence. So what you're seeing is, of course, with the situation in Cuba, a legitimization of this regime that's truly awful. There's a piece up on CNN right now that talks about how, quote, veterans of the revolution will be celebrating at the embassy in D.C. and in Havana. That's a revolution that put into place a dictator who's been there for 50 years, who summarily executed the people who he overthrew. It's a really gross situation. If you want a good indicator, something that's interesting and underreported, the Cuban national soccer team has been in the United States for, I believe, 2 weeks now, competing in the Gold Cup, which is the United States and a number of Latin American countries. And they've had 4 defections off a team of, I believe, 24 people. It's a sixth of the team that has simply walked off. There should be no clear indication that a large number of Cubans don't look at the opening of the United States to Cuba as some grand gesture, see it as legitimizing a horrid regime. Is happening in Iran. It's interesting that the UN Security Council gets the first nod at this deal. There are several Democrats, Cardin in Maryland, Menendez in New Jersey, who are questioning why the administration is going to the Security Council before it's even going to Congress. That should give a lot of people pause. What you're seeing in both situations is the administration's belief that giving these regimes legitimacy, opening the United States to them, will foment the type of change that ostensibly we would want, human rights changes and these sorts of things. But of course, it's nonsense. All it does is funnel huge amounts of money to horrid regimes with terrible human rights records, giving them extra sustenance with which they're going to further oppress their people and build up regimes and structures that are going to work to the detriment of the United States. It's the same thing as if you had said, we need to open ourselves up to the Soviet Union, make sure that they have, international legitimacy, et cetera, give them millions, billions of dollars to do with as they please. It wouldn't have made any sense as a strategy. Reagan understood that. Hopefully the Republican candidates understand that as well.
All right, on to the crazy Martini now. And, of course, there are, 15 official, expected to be 17 Republicans running for president, but one seems to be getting all the oxygen yet again. And if you've already heard this clip a million times, I apologize. But it was over the weekend in Iowa, Frank Luntz interviewing Donald Trump, and Luntz asked Trump about the fact that John McCain accused him of firing up the crazies, especially in reference to the well-attended event in Phoenix. I believe it was last weekend. And here's how the exchange went from there and how we got into the whole war hero comment from Donald Trump.
I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. Because he was captured. Okay? You can have, and I believe perhaps he's a war hero. But right now he said some very bad things about a lot of people.
And now, of course, you've got everybody in the Republican Party trying to take sides here. Most of them, of course, denouncing Trump for suggesting that McCain was somehow to be looked down upon because he was captured and held in captivity for 5 or 6 years, even after he had the chance to go home. So, Ian, unfortunately, a lot of Republicans are now stuck in the position of trying to figure out where they stand in a debate between a guy who's an obvious blowhard, and every time he's criticized, he'll go ad hominem against his critic, and that, of course, is Trump, in this case, denigrating a prisoner of war. And then, of course, there's McCain, who is a war hero after what he went through at the Hanoi Hilton. But most conservatives think that he's been an extreme disappointment on most issues, particularly immigration, but other issues as well, as a United States senator who does have a penchant for going after conservatives, whether they're wacko birds or crazies or whatever. So can't we just get rid of both of them?
Yeah, absolutely. My issue here, besides the fact that the comments on the merits are largely repellent, is the tone of this entire exchange. I wrote this morning, you can think that McCain has been a disappointment, that he should be forcefully primaried, that he was overboard to call the audience that came out for a Trump rally in Arizona crazies, the same way that he went overboard to call Cruz and his supporters wacko birds. You can think all of that and still think that Donald Trump sounds like a jerk, that his tone is just scoffing, is self-aggrandizing, is at its worst hissing. And then you get the sort of Facebook comments that he issued later where he says, I'm bringing attention to the plight of veterans in this country, as if no one before had ever thought to make veterans an issue in the history of the United States. Thank the Lord that Donald Trump has been sent to us to redeem us from our ignorance and sin. He's just a crass, uncouth human being, and the tone with which he treats not just this, but every situation in which he finds himself is so enormously off-putting that even if you sympathize with the people who want someone stronger, you sympathize with the idea that we need stronger, more forceful senators, et cetera, you can't help but think, can we get this guy gone? It's well past time for Donald Trump to go back to reality TV.
On that note, Ian, we're just getting warmed up. We got 4 more of these this week, so
that's right.
Pace yourself between this and the Jolt and everything else you're doing this week. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg.
Ian Tuttle of National Review in for Jim Garrity today. I'm Greg Columbus of Radio America. Thanks for being with us. And again, tune in Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.